Today, I want to talk about ideas in terms of consciousness, Russian nesting dolls, and God. And why I believe most intellectual people, highly intellectual, academic, philosophical people, are religious, and how those ideas have shaped my perspective on human experience, being only 22 years old. I don't have it all figured out. I'm not saying I'm correct. I just want to share. So, to me, all thought comes in the form of a Russian nesting doll. I like to use that metaphor because it just is perfect. I know that it has a technical name and I don't want to mispronounce it, so I'm going to call it a Russian nesting doll. It looks like one doll, and then when you open it, there's a perfect replica, and again, and it gets smaller and smaller. My dad had one of those when I was a kid. There was like these big bookshelves built into our basement, and it was on the very top shelf. And among some other antiques that were some of the only things in the house that I remember being off limits. So when I started learning I was reading Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson, and I kept coming back to that metaphor again and again. Such a clear picture in my head of this doll. And I say ideas are like that because it's an inverted Russian nesting doll, and you start at the very, very center. And as you go through life and learn things and add knowledge to your repertoire, you gain a layer, and you gain a layer, and you gain a layer, and each time you do that, you're encompassing more adaptation. Adaptation in the sense that human experience, animal experience even, really is just a constant set of action, implication for action and action. And then that action triggers another implication for action, and you continue going. And what seems to me to really separate us from the animals, the primitive beings, is that we have conscious action. So we can choose a goal that when we have an implication for action, we choose the behavior we want based on our goal. And whereas an animal, the goal is I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm scared, they're not choosing their goal at free will. Their action is rooted in biology. It's hardwired into them. We learn in very complex ways. I mean, we can learn from people that wrote things thousands of years ago. I don't want to spend too much time elaborating on that idea, but suffice to say that we learn in all different forms, and learning itself is an action. So we're choosing what we learn at the same time in order to further a chosen goal. So each time you know when you learn something that kind of fundamentally shifts your behavior, I call it an adaptation. Your brain wants to always have the best adaptation. That meaning of everything you've observed, learned, all the circumstances you've experienced, this is the best possible perception to have. This is the best possible mode of action, the best possible schema, interpretation of the world around you that your brain thinks is most likely to lead to success in attaining goals. When you learn something that kind of fundamentally changes that, it's alarming, first of all. An example that comes to mind for me is when I learned about what vegetable oil is. One of my goals is to have a healthy body. So when I learned that that was an ultra processed food that is not healthy for me, and it's in everything, it kind of has this, oh my, I need to change my adaptation because what I thought was correct wasn't correct. So when we apply that to the idea of the Russian nesting doll, the point I'm trying to get across is that when you get a new layer and you learn something, it's really deceiving that you think you have all the layers. Because you so strongly want to believe that your adaptation is the correct one, we kind of cling on to this subconscious belief that we've encapsulated all of the necessary information, and new information can sometimes be scary. A stranger who is successfully adapted with a completely different set of ideas is also kind of scary. Anyways, ideas get bigger and bigger, and perhaps a bigger level idea would be something like an ideology. It gives you a frame of reference for the world that drives your behavior and the way you interact with people, the way you interact with nature, the way perhaps even you interact with yourself, your internal dialogue with yourself. And again, they're deceiving, and I think it's a kind of dangerous game to talk about God. And so I want to do that very carefully and respectfully. I'm a Christian. I don't think any less of anyone who is not, whether that be an atheistic person or otherwise religious. I've really only been reading the Bible for about a year. I'm not trying to come at this from an overly Christian standpoint. I think why the more and more you learn about human experience, and for me, I've related it to this idea of Russian nesting dolls, because really all consciousness can be fit within that smaller and smaller and smaller, bigger and bigger and bigger. All the ideas that course through your head are building blocks of higher goals. And perhaps to someone that's a Christian, your highest goal is to live in the image of Jesus. That's your highest possible, no other goal surpasses that goal, and you can also picture it kind of like an umbrella. Every other goal, such as have a happy marriage and raise happy, strong children, take care of my body, have a healthy body, any other possible goal, you can see how that kind of fits under the main goal. And that main goal is going to be the most outer layer of the Russian doll. The true outer layer. Ideologies, for example, as Jordan Peterson, this is not my term, they're incomplete stories. They don't give us enough that the umbrella actually encompasses all possible experiences, even the unknown. What I mean by that in principle is that I'm 22. I've experienced very little in life, and I've actually been very lucky to have a relatively normal life. I will go through things that I don't know the best mode of adaptation, but so I don't know a middle or lower level doll. A lower level doll would be, my car broke down, what should I do? How do I get to work on time? Or whatever that might be. A higher level doll is, what kind of character do I want to have? And so the character you want to have is telling you, guiding you in that lower level problem or lower level implication for action. And why I think that most highly studied people are religious is because I'm going to say what I believe. The Holy Bible is the only story, the only chosen adaptation, chosen frame of reference that will actually be able to guide you successfully through all life experiences. The unpredictable, the predictable, so on and so forth. And I guess where I'll leave this off is also that we don't see anything survive that long. And so that was what originally, before I approached it from a more, really, I think it's from the approach of neuroscience, philosophy, psychology. But what really led me to start exploring the Bible was when I heard Jordan Peterson say that the Bible has outlived every empire. It has stood longer than stone. And untrue things that fundamentally don't work won't survive that long. So, thanks for listening to my symphony of ideas today. That's it for now.